Cruz, Elota, Sinaloa. A farming seat on the Pacific Corridor, surrounded by cane fields, ranch roads, and the flat hush of pre-dawn. By early October 2025, residents were living inside a slow-moving emergency, armed men passing on back roads, rumors of checkpoints, and families shifting from outlying villages toward the municipal seat for safety. Local reporting described people displaced toward La Cruz as armed groups appeared in nearby communities: Caimanes, Potrerillos del Norote, Emiliano Zapata, and Pueblo Nuevo, areas that should have been quiet at that hour. That day, state and federal authorities said the friction of organized crime had spilled further into the rural south of Sinaloa. The war between cartel factions, the Guzman side and the Zambada side, had already scarred daily life across the state. The fear was that the countryside was now carrying the weight of that conflict. Neighbors in La Cruz knew the sounds: motorcycles after midnight, unfamiliar trucks at the edge of town, farm gates left open. On the morning of October 6th, the government's interagency security group moved in. Navy personnel fanned out on dirt roads. A helicopter circled without lights, scanning corridors that connect small plots to the Mazatlán-Culiacán axis. The mission was to intercept a mobile cell of armed civilians before they set a perimeter around the municipal head. Authorities would later describe what they found as a moving arsenal: rifles, magazines, tactical gear, and a 5-vehicle package of 4 motorcycles and a truck that could shift men quickly through the cane. Against this backdrop, the victims were not only the targeted suspects or the officers who faced them. The victims included families who chose to stay quiet, who weighed whether to send children to school or wait for the all-clear, and who listened for the difference between a tractor EDES idle and the growl of a caravan at 5 a.m. The state's promise was simple: restore control long enough for routine to return. But in Sinaloa, where the internal war inside the Sinaloa cartel has dragged across municipalities since September 2024, control is brief and routine is fragile. According to the federal account, the first contact came as Navy patrols approached the northern approaches to La Cruz de Elota. A group of young men, 9 in total, was stopped and searched. The men were armed with long rifles. They had magazines and cartridges in quantity. They had tactical clothing suitable for quick movement. The convoy included 4 motorcycles and a pickup, enough to scout, screen, and move. The Navy said the men were operating as an armed cell. The Federal Security and Citizen Protection Secretariat framed the action as part of a coordinated response to armed presence displacing residents toward the municipal head. The arrest did not happen in a city center or on a federal highway. It unfolded on the margins, where farmland trails meet neighborhood streets. Local outlets reported that a helicopter supported the ground teams and that the men were detained near the head town after patrols detected the cell. There is no official claim from authorities that shots were exchanged during the arrest. Nor did authorities identify the 9 by name at the time of presentation. They were described as young males, allegedly armed, and were transported for federal processing. Critically, officials did not publicly assign the 9 detainees to a specific faction of the Sinaloa cartel in initial reports. In Sinaloa's current climate, it is common for readers to assume a side, Los Chapitos or Los Mayos. But in this case, the government's statements and local coverage stopped at armed civilians and presumed members of organized crime, without attributing them to a defined command chain. Any claim beyond that would exceed what the record supports as of October 6-7, 2025. Across multiple outlets citing official information, the inventory was consistent: 15 long guns, numerous magazines and cartridges, 4 motorcycles and 1 truck, and tactical gear. The haul was large enough to equip a short-range patrol capable of establishing a perimeter or staging a quick local show of force. Photographs released with the reports showed rifles laid out for cataloging alongside helmets and vests. Authorities emphasized that the entire package, detainees, weapons, ammunition, vehicles, was handed to the federal public prosecutor for formal investigation. What matters in an evidence narrative isn't only count but context. 15 long guns across 9 men implies more than 1 rifle per individual, suggesting either redundancy for sustained deployments, a rotation of weapons between riders and drivers, or preparation for stashing and resupply. 4 motorcycles in a rural municipality give mobility and noise discipline. A single truck allows for movement of heavier items or a quick exfiltration if roads are clear. This mix mirrors the small unit patterns that Sinaloan cells have used for years to test response times, intimidate, or prepare for larger moves. As the federal interagency group noted, the armed presence was already pushing residents inward toward La Cruz, a sign of control operations more than an isolated pass-through. There are gaps here, and it is important to state them. Authorities did not publicly list serial numbers, calibers, or ballistic links to prior crimes, information that often emerges later if the Attorney General's office or state forensics run comparisons. They did not release photographs of seized phones, radios, or paper notes that could tie the cell to a larger command. No official statement identified a ranking figure among the 9 detainees. These omissions are common in the first 24-48 hours of processing. They are also a reminder to separate what we can confirm from what remains speculation. The operation in La Cruz de Elota was presented as a coordinated action of Mexico's Federal Security Cabinet, executed on the ground by the Secretariat of the Navy, with participation noted from the Federal Security and Citizen Protection Secretariat, the Defense Secretariat, and prosecutorial authorities at both state and federal levels. Photos carried the courtesy SSPC tag in at least one report, indicating federal coordination and messaging. The detainees and objects were placed at the disposal of the Federal Public Ministry in Mazatlán to define legal status. The timing also matters. Since late 2024, the federal government has leaned on interagency deployments to Sinaloa as the internal cartel conflict intensified. National coverage and local dailies have tracked an elevated tempo of arrests, searches, and seizures targeting mobile cells and rural safe houses. The La Cruz operation fits that pattern. Aerial support, ground interdiction, multi-agency custody, and immediate transfer to federal prosecutors. The stated rationale, armed presence displacing civilians, placed civilian protection at the rhetorical center of the mission. At the national level, Mexico's Federal Security and Citizen Protection Secretariat is led by Omar Garcia Harfuch, appointed in October 2024 by President Claudia Sheinbaum. In 2025, Harfuch has routinely briefed cases of violence and federal actions, and SSPC communiques have framed coordinated operations as part of a broader strategy to reduce homicide and disrupt organized crime deployments. In this specific Elota case, available public reports attribute the on-scene operation and detentions to Navy elements under the interagency umbrella. There is no official transcript showing Harfuch personally announcing the Elota arrests in a press conference within the first day. The federal role, however, is explicit through SSPC and CMAR participation and custody. In Elota, public reaction often travels by voice before it reaches the page. A neighbor seeing a helicopter at dawn, a family texting to delay a trip to Mazatlán, a farmer marking where he saw motorcycles pass without plates. The day of the operation, local outlets documented a wider canvas of violence across Sinaloa, homicides in other municipalities, a human remains discovery near Culiacán, and placed the Elota arrests inside a map drawn by months of cartel infighting. For families in La Cruz, the 9 arrests and the 15 rifles were not an abstract line in a federal tally. They were the difference between staying home and sending kids to school. There is relief when a convoy is stopped. There is also caution. In Sinaloa, communities have learned that a seizure and 9 detainees do not end a dispute between factions with deep roots and rural logistics. The La Cruz operation shows the federal state acting with speed and coordination: detect, interdict, secure, transfer. It also shows how fragile normalcy is in a countryside where a handful of motorcycles and a truck can unsettle an entire town. The proof of success will not be in the photo of rifles on a table. It will be in whether traffic flows without fear next week, whether parents trust the morning again, and whether residents stop moving inward toward the municipal head because the outskirts feel safe. That measure, not a weapons count, is what people in Elota are waiting for. To be precise about what is known and what is not, 9 men were detained by Navy personnel in La Cruz de Elota on October 6, 2025. 15 long guns, a large quantity of magazines and cartridges, 4 motorcycles, a truck, and tactical equipment were secured. The detainees and objects were delivered to the Federal Public Ministry in Mazatlán. Authorities did not publicly identify the men by name, did not assign them to a specific cartel faction in initial reports, and did not release ballistic or forensic matches within the first 24-48 hours. The operation formed part of a broader interagency response to armed groups whose presence had begun displacing residents toward La Cruz. Those are the facts as established by official statements and local reporting within the first day. The people of Elota live with the noise and the quiet. The noise of helicopters and engines at daybreak, the quiet after an operation, when you listen harder because you want to hear nothing. This is what a federal victory looks like on the ground. 9 detainees, 15 rifles, and a morning where the market opens on time. It is necessary. It is not yet enough.